In the heart of winter, 1959, a group of 10 experienced hikers set out on an ambitious expedition. Their goal was the remote peaks of the northern Ural Mountains in the Soviet Union. They were young, strong, highly capable students and graduates from the Ural Polytechnical Institute. Their leader, Igor Dyatlov, was a seasoned trekker, meticulous in his planning. This was to be a Category 3 expedition, the highest difficulty rating. They were prepared for the harsh conditions, the biting winds, and the deep, unforgiving snow. They carried skis, heavy packs, and a determination to conquer one of the Soviet Union's most desolate landscapes. Their journey into the wilderness was documented with diaries and photographs, capturing moments of camaraderie and the stark beauty of their surroundings. The expedition began with a sense of adventure and youthful optimism. They traveled by train, then truck, and finally on foot, leaving the last vestiges of civilization behind them. The group consisted of 7 men, 2 women. Yuri Yudin forced to turn back early due to illness. He would be the last person to see them alive. The remaining 9 pressed onward, deeper into the vast, silent expanse of the taiga. Their planned route would take them across a mountain pass toward Otorten, a name that in the local Mansi language means, "Don't go there." The name was an old warning, a piece of folklore dismissed by the modern, scientific minds of the young hikers. But something went terribly wrong. The group failed to send their scheduled telegram on February 12th. At first, there was little alarm. Delays were common on such difficult treks. Days turned into a week, and then another. Silence. Concern grew back at the Institute and among their families. A search was finally launched on February 20th. Volunteer search parties, composed of students and teachers, were the first to venture into the vast wilderness. They followed the group's intended path, scanning the endless white landscape for any sign of the missing hikers. The scale of the search area was immense, the conditions brutal. The search teams expected to find evidence of a common mountaineering accident, perhaps an avalanche, a fall, or a group that had simply been overcome by the extreme weather. They were prepared for a tragedy, but not for the baffling scene they were about to uncover. What they found on the slopes of Kholat Shakal, or Dead Mountain, would defy all logical explanation. It was a mystery that began with a single, abandoned tent. It was a scene that posed more questions than answers. The tent had been sliced open from the inside. A deliberate, desperate act. Whoever had been inside needed to get out. And they needed to get out fast. They hadn't even used the entrance. Inside the tent, all the group's belongings were left behind. Their heavy winter coats, their boots, their supplies, their personal effects, all neatly arranged, as if waiting for their owners to return. The temperature that night, as low as -30 degrees Celsius. Fleeing into that cold without proper clothing was a death sentence. Yet the evidence suggested that is exactly what happened. What could cause 9 seasoned hikers to abandon shelter in such a panicked, self-destructive way? A trail of footprints led away down the slope toward a nearby forest. The footprints told a chilling story, barefoot, wearing only socks, in a single boot. They walked in a calm, orderly fashion, not running. The prints continued for nearly a mile before disappearing under the snow. No sign of a struggle, no footprints belonging to anyone else. As if the hikers had calmly walked away, ill-equipped, into the Siberian winter. The initial discovery was just the beginning of a story that would become one of the most enduring and chilling enigmas of the 20th century. On February 27th, the search party made its first horrific discovery. About 1.5 kilometers downhill from the abandoned tent, under a large, ancient cedar tree, they found the remains of a small fire. And next to it, lying side by side in the snow, were the first 2 bodies, Yuri Krivonyshenko, Yuri Doroshenko. Both men were stripped down to their underwear. They were barefoot. The cedar tree above them bore strange marks. Its lower branches were broken up to a height of 5 meters. It appeared that someone had frantically tried to climb the tree. Was it an attempt to get a better view of the abandoned camp? Or were they trying to escape something on the ground below? About 300 meters from the tree, back in the direction of the camp, the searchers found the next body. It was Igor Dyatlov, the group's leader. He was found lying on his back. His posture suggested he had been crawling back up the slope, perhaps attempting a desperate return to the shelter of the tent. Not far from Dyatlov, the fourth body was discovered. It was Zinaida Kolmogorova. She was found even further up the slope. She, too, appeared to have been trying to make it back to the camp. Her body showed signs of a desperate struggle against the elements. The discovery of these 4 individuals, all of whom officially died of hypothermia, only deepened the mystery. The search for the remaining 5 hikers would have to wait for the snows to melt. For 2 long months, the search yielded nothing. On May 4th, the final, most shocking discovery. 75 meters from the cedar tree, buried under 4 meters of snow in a den-like hollow within a ravine, the last hikers were found. Lyudmila Dubinina, Semyon Zolotaryov, Alexander Kolovatov, Nikolai Thibault Brignol. Their bodies turned the case into a horrifying enigma. They had massive, violent internal injuries. Thibault Brignol, severe skull fracture. Dubinina and Zolotaryov, multiple fractured ribs, injuries like the force of a car crash. The doctor: these injuries could not be caused by a human being. The force required was too great. Yet there were no corresponding external wounds, not bruised or cut, crushed from the inside. Dubinina found kneeling by a small waterfall, face in running water. Tongue missing, hyoid bone missing, parts of mouth tissue missing. Zolotaryov, ribs crushed, eyeballs missing. Some clothing tested positive for low-level radioactive contamination. Levels not lethal, but unexpectedly present. It seemed survivors took clothing from the dead in a final attempt to stay warm. The formal criminal investigation was launched in late February 1959, led by Chief Prosecutor Lev Ivanov. The case was shrouded in official secrecy, but there were signs of pressure from higher authorities. Ivanov later said he was ordered to close the case quickly and to attribute the deaths to natural causes. The final report, issued in May 1959, was brief and anticlimactic. It blamed a compelling natural force the hikers couldn't overcome. Decades later, after the Soviet collapse, files were partially declassified, and the full strange story began to emerge, sparking renewed interest and many theories. One of the most persistent and logical theories is that of an avalanche. Proponents suggest a slab avalanche struck the tent. Fearing being buried alive, the hikers would have had no choice but to cut their way out. This would explain the frantic exit. However, the slope was not steep enough for a natural avalanche. Furthermore, the search party reported no obvious signs of one. The hikers' poles were still standing upright. Another major flaw is the trail of footprints. The tracks leading away from the tent were orderly. They walked. They did not run. Given the secrecy of the Soviet era, many researchers believe the hikers were accidental victims of a secret weapons test. The strange orange spheres of light could have been related. The nature of the injuries is eerily consistent with the effects of a concussion or blast wave from a powerful explosion. The presence of low-level radiation, the orange skin, gray hair, and the subsequent cover-up all support this theory. Despite its explanatory power, the military theory lacks definitive proof. No shrapnel, no craters, or other physical evidence of an explosion were ever reported. One of the most intriguing theories is the concept of infrasound, which can have powerful psychological effects: intense dread, irrational panic, shortness of breath. This could explain the hikers' sudden, inexplicable terror and their flight from the tent. This theory, however, does not adequately explain the massive internal injuries. Other more fringe theories venture into the realm of cryptozoology, suggesting an encounter with an unknown creature, a Russian Yeti. However, the complete lack of any non-human tracks makes this explanation highly improbable. Over 6 decades have passed, yet the story of the 9 hikers refuses to fade. Each theory ultimately collides with a wall of contradictory evidence. The unresolved nature of the Dyatlov Pass Incident is precisely what makes it so enduring. It is a perfect mystery. We are left with the haunting images captured by the hikers themselves. These are the last transmissions from a lost world. The evidence they left behind are not clues that lead to a solution, but permanent monuments to a question that may never be answered. Beyond the speculation, there lies a solemn duty to remember the victims, skilled adventurers, students, friends, their lives cut short in the most terrifying and baffling of circumstances. What compelling natural force drove 9 experienced hikers from their only shelter into the frozen dark? The snows of the Ural Mountains keep their secrets well. The final chapter of the Dyatlov Pass incident remains unwritten.